For those of you that have been watching Tokyo on Fire, you know one of the recurring issues is the Abe administration's push to somehow push the economy by immigration policies or having more children in Japan or to include women into the workforce. The particular part about having more children is an issue we dealt with last week, and we're going to deal with it right now, but it's an issue that's really got a lot of complications to it.
There's certainly the government's major focus, this new third arrow approach, the new third arrow approach, well, the new three arrows approach, has gone to the implementation stage in terms of this.
We've decided it. This is where we're going.
Where we're going, and we now have an advisory council. And the advisory council had its first meetings this last week and this week on why are we here and what are we doing? And it has been somewhat awkward. Mm-hmm. The first meeting was memorable only because one of the participants, who happens to be one of the major singers in Japan and an actress, came out of it and said, I don't really want to call it what the government calls it.
Sure.
Can I call it something different?
Yes.
And she offered in her in a long blog post what she thinks the commission should really be called. The government just went bananas.
Of course.
What did she say it should be called?
Well, who cares? I mean, that decision came and went.
Right,
I mean,
right.
And
I know, but
you've
Japan
been appointed by the Prime Minister
advisory councils
right?
for everything.
Okay, she wanted to call it the Inclusion Council because for her it seemed these ideas that were being talked around the table were talking about including more and more people in the workforce, in the political discussion. And she says, can I call it the Inclusion Council? And they said, no! You don't decide the propaganda message that we're putting out.
Was this the babies? Is this related?
Yeah, babies. It's related
Okay.
to the babies in that one of the three arrows is raising the birth rate per woman from 1.4 to 1.8.
Right.
And she's a mother. She has two children, one of whom has a disability, and that's where she got the inclusion aspect out of it, because she said, it was really hard having a disabled child and doing work at the same time. Right. And that's part of why she thinks she's on the council.
Right.
Why and it might be so, but it was a stumble. And then they had their second meeting, and again, the members of this council, which is extremely varied. You talk about variation. You talk about it's good to have all kinds of voices. If they're all talking about something completely different, like it is very much and has been so far like blind people describing the elephant.
Right.
It depends on where you are. It depends on what part you're touching. And so far, the new three arrows, especially having to do with childbirth, they're talking about all kinds of different things, and there doesn't seem to be a program.
Well, we knew there was going to be a problem here. I mean, it's a new ministry, a new minister. They really don't have a full grasp of what it is that's in their portfolio. There's so much bleeding out into other portfolios too. But I think they are empowered to move forward.
They're empowered to at least continue meeting and come up with some sort of program. Now, as we said, the goals are really ambitious. But, the question is how you do it.
Right.
Right. It's just countries all over the region, whether we're talking about Singapore with its paying educated women to have babies, we're talking about South Korea, Taiwan, and now we see that China finally said, hey, the one China policy was probably not a great idea. Let's get out of that while we still have a chance. Right. Childbirth has been an extremely fraught issue for the 1.78 million people who live in this region. Right. And to think that you can just come in and you will just be able to come up with some great ideas and slap them all together and it'll work is a bit presumptuous.
Okay, but the idea here is that it's not going to happen by immigration. I think that part has been
Isn't
settled.
that interesting?
Yes, it is interesting.
Weren't we talking about immigration when we were talking about the first three arrows?
That's right, and it went away. And
Kaunotaro brought that up, and he was immediately slapped down by Suga, saying, we are not talking about immigration reform.
Right.
And so that was part of administrative reform that went nowhere.
So the focus is on how do we encourage people to have more babies, and that's got a long lead time. I mean, it's nice to talk about it now. It should have been talked about and decided and discussed, 15 years ago, because now we might have, 15 and 14 and 13-year-old kids.
Well, when we were if we were having this discussion 15 years ago, we would have accepted that it was just going to decline, and what we really need to do is reinforce the pension system. And if you look back at the debates 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that's what they were talking about.
Right.
We have to save the pension system because let's look at the demographics. It's doomed.
Right.
Now they're trying to. They don't talk about the pension system. We're going to try to re-engineer society instead.
Right.
Good luck with that.
I think we should talk about the pension system perhaps in another podcast, because it's like one of those things it's a part of living in Japan that really, if you scratch the surface a little bit, it doesn't reveal anything. I mean, you really don't know how much you're going to get paid out when you retire, how much you've paid into the system. It's like a black hole, and it seems like the questions that are asked and the investigations that are done, the reason why the information doesn't come out is because there's something nefarious going on.
No, I'm not sure whether it's nefarious or not, but definitely in terms of Japan's image, and maybe you would want to comment about that.
I have nothing to say. I mean, you guys have been going back and forth the whole time and made this very boring, frankly. I mean, you really did. Because really, why don't you ask people why they're not having children? I mean, this really gets at the core identity of a person. And I think that we're living in a society, these other parts, as you mentioned, where younger people are thinking of children in terms of subtraction as opposed to addition. In generations before, you had a child because it added to your life. I see a lot of materialism. I see a lot of people wanting to live a certain lifestyle. They're not going to listen to the government telling them to get the birth rate up.
Right.
That's in one ear and out the other.
So they're stuck. Why do they keep
talking about this? Take some of the pressure off. I've gone to all these women's conferences and this keeps coming up. Got to have the babies, got to get those numbers up. And it's just sort of, do you think women are really going to respond to that? I mean, even young men aren't going to respond to it. Because I think it's a lifestyle choice. So what are you going to do about that? Why aren't we talking robotics? Why aren't we talking AI? I mean, we've got to sort of let people be who they are.
Right. Well, these kinds of issues, I mean, they are really glacial. I mean, they move so slowly. I mean, anytime the government is trying to influence, like child rearing, for example, I mean, how huge is that? The impact of that is just
And I'm not sure if it's
minimal.
always a conscious choice when I say subtraction versus addition, but clearly in a more modern industrialized democracy, birth rates have been going down everywhere, including in the United States, including in Europe. It's just happening because people are saying that, well, I have made that choice. We're in the era of personal choice.
Right.
So the government just doesn't have that sort of caregiving function as much as it did. The whole cradle to grave, taking care of you is gone. It's over. And so in response, the public is saying, okay, well, then I'm going to make my choices and don't give me this recipe that I have to follow.
But the thing is that the sale point here, that you're going to have to take responsibility for yourself, is a dead letter in this country. The government has a role to play in taking care of you. And you see it over and over again. And you see it in terms of the Fukushima nuclear disaster. Hey, in other countries, you probably would say, hey, you guys got lots of nice subsidies. In fact, one of the things that Kono Taro is targeting is specific subsidies that are given to communities that host nuclear power plants. That's, again, one of his tricks to get around the corner. But this issue of the government taking care of you, that's been settled in this country. The government is there to take care of you.
Well, I know. My point was on this particular issue. It's a very personal choice. Fukushima Daiichi is a whole nother thing because, of course, there's a strong role for government. And I get the collective security here. But I'm just saying that telling someone you have to, or sort of, it just seems like it's kind of a pandering to the people. It's a little bit of sort of father telling, young daughter that you have to go out and be fruitful. And when I talk to especially the young women that I meet, we're not talking about this as one of their major goals. I mean, they're trying to figure out their way, and I really don't judge it one way or the other. I'm all for, if that's your desire, to have a marriage and a family. I mean, that's great, good for you. But we are living in this time of making other alternative, inclusionary choices. So I just don't see the government connecting to the population as a whole on this. And I would like them to connect, because I think Japanese babies are adorable.
Yes,
I'd love to see more of them. So it's just the message isn't really working. It's not resonating. So I'm wondering why they keep using the statistics. In a way, I think that is too disengaging. Maybe get more of these personal stories. That's why I wanted to know what that blogger was calling that council. Of course, from the government's perspective, it's like, that's been settled, let's go forward. But she's giving her personal narrative then, which is good. It draws me in more, because I want to know about how tough is it to raise a couple of children, I guess, and one with special needs. That is a compelling story. And then she could maybe go, I'm picturing sort of when I lived in New Hampshire with the town hall meetings, and you'd have people show up either with their dog or with their baby or something and tell their story before the town council, and we'd all be in there for the show. And I think that can be impactful because it's more emotional too, and we know the emotional can connect more.
Well, I think the government just didn't do a very good job 20 years ago. They saw the numbers coming. They saw the demographics. They were able to...
Avoid.
Yes, avoid. You know, the fire is not raging right yet.
That's right.
And right now it is a little bit late to be talking about this, because the lead time is so significant. So what are they going to do? I mean, if they don't do anything, the workforce is going to shrink. The number of old people is going to grow. Their needs, the medical needs that they have, the pension funds, they're not going to be able to service them. They need more people feeding into the pension fund by working productively. They're in a real catch-22.
I think if you could raise income, I mean, if you could do something with the taxes to give people a sense of, it's an addition. Having a child is an addition. So it's not going to just completely drain me and drain my lifestyle.
And they're certainly thinking about that.
Okay,
they are thinking about making changes to the tax system so that there are increasing benefits.
And it's rational choice.
There are a number of proposals that are out on the table. Whether it'll be in time for the election is what interests the politicians. We have to be absolutely blunt. And one of the ideas that's been being kicked around is that they don't really care that the goals, and it's not the only goal. We have 0 people quitting their jobs in order to take care of an elderly relative. Currently, the numbers are about 100,000 people per year leave the workforce because of that. How are they going to zero that out? You know, how are they going to train and pay all of these extra care workers if they don't import foreign
Well, and that's where I think they are relaxing in immigration, for sure.
And then the other goal is the $600 trillion, which we can also bring up. The $600 trillion, they came up with a great idea this week.
Well, that is arrow number 1 of the new Abe revitalization plan, isn't it?
And they came up with a great idea.
Yes. Well, I think, as I understand it, we just change how we count. We count with these fingers instead of these.
Yeah, and they decided they're going to change how research and development is counted, not as something that is consumed, but as investment. And that alone will up GDP by 3% statistically over the last 20 years. And so they're much closer to their goal.
Okay, over the next 5 years, they've got to increase GDP by 20%. That's the target.
Nominally, yeah.
And just by including R&D in the figures as an investment vehicle, they'll probably get, what, 2 or 3
They get 3%. They get 3 percentage points of that 20. Nice.
Let's go. Okay, good job.
Why don't they redefine GDP to GEE?
Well, I mean, this is in connection with other international agreements of recalculating and the standardization of how you do accounting. But
and some countries do some really funky things. I didn't know this, but when this issue came up regarding Japan's recounting, it turns out that the UK includes illegal drug sales and crime in its GDP figures.
Prostitution's included.
Yeah, we include car wrecks and the like too, and hospital visits.
But in this case, drug dealing is included. Of course, it's true in the United States where we're from. You have to list in your 1040 your drug sales. Your proceeds. Otherwise, you're in violation
of the law. We don't want to be in violation of the law.
Yeah, and they don't share, of course, with the Drug Enforcement Agency any information.
Not at all. Okay, but the important point here is that he's staked his not his reputation, but he's drawn a line in the sand. We're going to hit 600 trillion GDP.
But they can't.
No, of course they can't. But he's trying.
But that's the crux of this whole argument.
Put a man on the moon, you could, but...
Yeah, but in here, they have 3 goals that, when you look at the numbers, they can't hit. What was the purpose of that? Mm-hmm. That's the interesting question, I think, politically. Do you just declare things and, okay, I didn't make the goals by the dates that we promised, but then again, think of it in terms of Abe personally. His term as LDP president ends in 2018.
Right.
None of the goals is achieved by that date.
Well, there you go.
It's beyond his term.
Right.
So I guess après moi le déluge, after me, what happens?
Right.
Who cares?
Sure, not my problem.
It's not my department. I'm out of power. Who cares? Wouldn't that be a terrible message, though, internationally?
Well, it also it's damaging the brand of Japan. I mean, what are these guys thinking over there?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I think setting that so high is already damaging.
Well, it's not just the 600 trillion. It's also bringing the birth rate, up to what 1.8.
These are artificial,
artificial, unachievable goals. Right. Yeah, they damage brand Japan.
That's right.
Okay, so with that, I think I'd like to draw this discussion to a close.